My name is Kayla Murray, and I am the Standing Committee Chair for Finance, Economic Opportunities and Tourism. And before we kick off, I would like to give the opportunity to the members of the Standing Committee to also introduce themselves online. Members, if you can please introduce yourselves.
Sorry, Chair, I think we're all waiting for one another. My name is Andrikus van der Besthuizen and a member of this committee. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair. My name is Khalil Parankais and I'm also a member of the Finance Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Morning, Chair. My name is Nomen Kondlo and I'm a member of this committee. Thank you.
Welcome and thank you.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning, members, and good morning, everyone on the platform. My name is Isaac Mbulelo Sileku, and I'm a member of the committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Members, we are also joined by officials from Provincial Treasury, and it would be remiss of me not to wish Anne-Marie Smith, CFO, a very happy birthday today, and thank you for joining us on your special day. On behalf of the Standing Committee, we really do appreciate you making time for us today. So I'll now hand over to the Minister to firstly introduce herself and then to hand over to the officials to introduce themselves.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning to the honourable members of the Standing Committee. My name is Mireille Wenger and I'm the Executive Authority responsible for the Provincial Treasury.
Good morning, honourable members of the committee, Chair, Minister David Savage. I'm the head official of the Provincial Treasury and head of the department. Just by way, perhaps, of introducing the department, I'm going to ask if all of my colleagues can just briefly turn their cameras on. We do have the full SMS cadre from the department here today. In all their glory. They can be quite an intimidating team to work with, but we are all celebrating, as you say, our CFO's birthday today as well. This is the full team here to answer questions the committee might have on vote 3. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. Lovely to see everybody's faces. Would you like to also have the opportunity to introduce yourselves, or are you happy just to show your lovely faces?
Chair, I think in the interests of time, the names of all of the officials are in the chat bar, and I don't want to take up too much of the committee's time from questions. I think we do broadly all know each other. But what I can do is, as individuals respond to questions, they can just indicate who they are, just so that there's no confusion from the committee side.
Okay, I appreciate your suggestion. Thank you very much. And yes, we must be mindful of time today. All right, so that will take us to the next portion of our agenda for today. In terms of apologies, the only apology that I have received is from Mr. Aziz Hardeen. And then I would just like to remind those who are joining us online that we do have some house rules just to make sure that things move as smoothly as possible. So throughout the duration of the call, could you please keep yourselves muted and turn your videos off unless called on to speak? It will just make the flow a bit easier. And if you have any devices around you, please can you turn them on mute or turn off your notifications and use headphones as well, if that helps to facilitate a quieter environment and control the noise and prevent background. So from there, I would now like to provide the Minister with an opportunity to make any opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. The Provincial Treasury received 340.7 million rand for the 2023-24 financial year, which is a 16.5 million rand increase from financial year to financial year, or an additional 37.9 million over the medium-term expenditure framework. It does make this one of the smaller departments by budget, but certainly one of the most important critical enablers and good governance assurer. Honourable members will see in the budget that this budget continues much of the good work that has been done by the Provincial Treasury over the last year. Just to highlight some of those as culture and values, risk management, infrastructure management systems, and reporting on infrastructure development. Of course, the Fiscal Futures Project. As we know, with an increasing population, we need evidence-based spending. And then, of course, the team works on budget implementation and expenditure reviews. They're working hard on reporting reforms, of course, the excellent PERO and MERO documents, integrated management between province and municipalities, and then, of course, a shift from purely compliance to the Treasury being an enabler. And then you'll see there's some additional funding for supply chain management reform, data technology and integrating systems. You'll see modernization of some of our legacy systems to bring us into the modern days, as it were. And then in line with that, modernization of some of our offices. So with that, I'm going to hand over to the head official of the Treasury to build on those opening remarks.
Minister, yes, I think that the current financial year has been one of excellent progress in the execution of the department's strategy. As the members will know, and is described again in our APP and in the vote, our focus is really on governance, transformation, and integrated service delivery through integrating financial governance and ensuring effective local governance. We have two particular priority focus areas around supply chain management reform and infrastructure investment. And we support these through three critical strategic interventions. The one, obviously, given the nature of the Provincial Treasury, is around effective management of our talent pipeline. That's the people of the Treasury who are critical to the work that we do. Alongside that, we are on a journey of digital transformation, and that's taking an important step forward in the forthcoming year. And supported by effective knowledge management systems, people with technology, generating ideas that drive the Treasury on its journey, governance, transformation, and integrated service delivery. As the Minister has noted, is an increase, about just a little under 6% from the original 2022 MTEF to 340 million. Most of the department spending is, as I mentioned, on compensation, about 65% of it. And that's why we put such an emphasis on culture and talent management in the department. The Minister's already, I think, indicated some of the highlights per program, and these are described in considerable detail in the documentation that we have provided. For Program 2, of course, the core of what this program does is managing the budget process. That's at the provincial level, which is a detailed exercise, technical as well as strategic. And at the local government level, from an integration and an oversight perspective. One of the critical things there, building on what we've done with the expenditure reviews, is our Fiscal Futures project, which is making some really encouraging progress towards more evidence-led budgeting, and that is being integrated with the work we do on our economic reviews and analysis through the MERO and the PERO. The budget committee, those members who were attending the budget committee will have noticed, of course, that our reporting reforms initiative is also getting some really nice traction in terms of quarterly reporting on an integrated financial and non-financial basis, progress across the provincial government, and some of those lessons are also being mainstreamed into the local government reporting environment in terms of the quarterly reports in that environment. The really big gear change in the forthcoming financial year relates to our systems environment in Program 3, where we manage the very expansive systems that underpin government operations, Provincial, Logis, BAS, and so forth, and making sure that we are progressively modernizing those systems and readying them for the integrated financial management system that's being rolled out nationally, and for which the Western Cape is a pilot site. So lots of background work going on there, and a great team driving that forward, both in what we call our evergreening our legacy systems, but also integrating our data sets, these big data sets, and making sure that we keep a client customer focus in the sort of outputs of this work as well. So a lot of innovation in the technology space, and some of it very practical, that will really assist in efficiency and effectiveness across Western Cape government. Things like e-leave management, the digitization of subsistence and travel, dashboarding, various reporting data sets to allow managers to manage resources they have available more effectively. I think just two final points to bring to the attention of the committee is that talent management in the provincial treasury environment is a ongoing opportunity. We are making progress in achieving our employment equity targets. There are still challenges there, but we've taken for some years now a long run approach of growing our own timber and complementing that with external recruitments, but making sure that we are looking across the career life cycle, from young interns, a few of whom I was privileged to meet in the last few days, to early career professionals, to mid-career professionals joining the team finance family. And then, of course, giving them an operating environment that is conducive to the sort of work and long hours we do ask them to put in. And so, in some cases, we have got a need to really modernize office space, both for the post-COVID environment where we have hybrid working arrangements, but also just to standard modernization and replacement. There's about 500 square meters of space that we're looking at modernizing to reflect who we are as a department and the way in which we work. There are finally, I think, a few new indicators that are introduced in the APP this year that are trying to reflect more accurately the journey that we are on as a department. In Program 1, we're focusing on better tracking of our digital transformation activities across the department, and on the strengthening the measures that we've taken to integrate and strengthen our overall internal governance systems in the department. In Program 2, we're looking at how we manage key aspects of the budget process, particularly in relation to revenue management, and particularly revenue retention, sort of indicators around that, and also then in the gambling space, which is a policy and oversight mandate for the department in respect to the Gambling and Racing Board. And then in Program 3, just to reflect the journey we're on with supply chain management reform, particularly related to strategic sourcing and a commodity-based approach across the province. So it's planned to be, I think, a key, an exciting year for the department, and I think one in which we are all quite inspired for as we go into the next financial cycle. Thank you.
Thank you very much, HOD. Members, so we will now have an opportunity to ask questions based on these opening remarks by the Minister and by the HOD. Do I see any hands? I recognize Member Nkondlo, then Member van der Westhuizen.
Thank you, Chair. Before I ask, please indicate how would you want us to drive the questions so that at least we've got a sense of the time allocated and the rounds that you'll give for the discussion. Can you do that?
Absolutely. Thank you, Member, for the question. So we will now ask questions based solely on the introductory remarks made, and thereafter we will put the entire vote budget to the committee for questions. I will not go on a page-by-page basis, but rather I will put the entire report or the entire budget rather to the committee to ask questions on. Thank you.
Okay, I don't have much questions on the remarks. My questions are on the book.
Okay, noted. So we'll come back to you when we put the budget. Member van der Westhuizen?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you for those introductory remarks. Mr. Savage referred to the integrated financial management system, a system which I think in 2 years from now would have been introduced some 20 years ago. And we know that in the software development work, unfortunately, things move quite swiftly. And I think that has been the problem with this system, in the sense that, you know, just as they want to introduce it or implement it, then, you know, things have already changed again, and they start again from scratch. And I also presume that the scope of the project has probably seen a lot of creep and a lot of expansion. Now, for a number of years, we've now been told that the Western Cape has been identified as a pilot for this. Can we perhaps hear a little bit more about, you know, the status of this? Quite often with these things, certain, can I call it segments, or certain of the facilities or capabilities of such a software system will be introduced. Let's say, for example, the financial one, then you often have the let's call it the personal one, the staff one, and then perhaps inventory and so on. Where are we with this system currently? And if I may ask, my impression is that, you know, being the pilot for a new software system is quite often being handed a poison cup. Do we get additional support from National Treasury to be a pilot site for this? And if not, is there no way in which we can perhaps pass this poison cup on to somebody else? Because I am concerned that in my own experience, the introduction of a new software system takes up a lot of time and causes a lot of frustration. That's my first question, Chair. The second one deals with the gambling board, Racing and Gambling Board, for which this department is the governance, or exercises the governance. We have had this dream of them becoming less dependent on provincial funds and to eventually move to a system of self-sufficiency or self-funding. Perhaps if you could just inform us as to how are you managing the achievement of that. I think when we later get to the figures, I don't quite see that happening yet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I recognize Member Nkondlo. Apologies, Member, did I not give you the opportunity to ask your question? Member Nkondlo?
Are we back to the book? So I can ask my questions from the book?
Oh, no, we're not back to the book yet. We're still on introductory remarks. I was just recognizing your hand. Is it a legacy?
It's standing for the time when we ask from the book.
Okay, all right, it's a legacy hand, thank you. All right, and then I also have questions which I'd like to put firstly to the HOD, just touching on Member van der Westhuizen's question on the digital transformation. This is an area that I find quite interesting myself, and I noted that there was mentioning of tracking being done in terms of this, in terms of dashboarding, and in terms of integrating data sets. if you could perhaps just take us through, in particular, how the tracking is being done, what sort of software is being used in this process. And then secondly, I noted in the minister's introductory remarks, she spoke about a move from compliance, and if she could possibly please elaborate on what some of the challenges have been in this and how they have been mitigated. I'll now hand over to the minister and to the HOD.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think there's one question for me, which was your last one. So I think what I was trying to say there is that what we're trying to do is not only focus on compliance, so we still continue to focus on that, but also through that compliance, how can we enable? So for example, through the infrastructure reporting, how can we enable better delivery of infrastructure through the or, for example, through the Vulnerable Municipalities Project. Not only that, but how can we help them focus to not only be sustainable, but also start to grow and looking at the growth municipalities. So it's more of the mindset and in the kind of work that we do, how can we use those kind of functions to not only ensure compliance, but then have growth or enable growth, as it were. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. I recognize HOD.
Great, thank you very much, Chair. With respect to Honourable van der Westhuizen's questions, I will ask my colleagues to come in on this who are involved in the detailed engagements around the IFMS. It has been frustrating for us as a province. It is led nationally, and there have been various challenges nationally that have considerably delayed IFMS rollout. And that's been a frustration for us because the legacy systems that we're working on are very old. They're aged systems now, and even written in languages where software languages where the programming languages rather where the skill sets are not readily available for in the markets anymore. What our approach has been in this respect has been to say, listen, we're not going to be waiting for the IFMS to come along. We want to be present at the creation for the IFMS. And so our evergreening process and our data warehousing initiatives are aimed at laying the foundation for an IFMS that solves the problems that are in front of us, or the challenges that are in front of us as a province. So in reaching this conclusion, instead of saying sitting and waiting, we've looked a little bit at the international examples of big IT systems rollout, and there are various international examples, and Member van der Westhuizen is absolutely correct. There are many examples of profound challenges that have been experienced in this respect. What we learned from that was the successful rollouts of large-scale IT systems do not take an entirely top-down approach. One way of saying it is that they seek to solve the most immediate problems that are in front of the users of those systems and build out from there. And what we are trying to do, I think, in our initiatives in evergreening and in data warehousing is solve those immediate problems and use that to also help to influence as a pilot site the actual rollout mechanisms for the IFMS as it emerges. But we've taken the position that we can no longer afford to wait in this respect. I think that also responds to Member van der Westhuizen's concerns that it's a poison chalice. It is a poison chalice, I think, if one waits and is essentially a silent recipient or as a pilot site. Rather than an active and engaged lead and co-creator in the process. And so that's where we're trying to position ourselves as Western Cape government. There will be government-wide IT systems introduced as part of the IFMS. we want to be we want to assist in the creation and bring the perspectives, experience that we have as the Western Cape to actually influence the design, sequencing of the rollout of the IFMS. So we don't see it as a poison cup, but we do see an urgency in us taking a leading role and really leveraging our potential and our capabilities to assist in accelerating IFMS in the design and the rollout of IFMS at a national level. On the question of the gambling board, yes, it is a slower then we would like move to self-sufficiency in the sector. The sector itself, we are in the process of quite a deep policy review for gambling in the gambling regulation in the Western Cape, and so we are, and the sector itself is in a process of quite fundamental change with gambling preferences changing quite significantly. There's been shifts to online gambling and sports betting, and some other markets like the casino markets appear to have matured, and so I think what we're doing is we're moving cautiously, and we're wanting to make sure that movements that we make are policy-led in terms of the direction that we get from the executive and the legislature in terms of the role of gambling in the Western Cape economy, and the various social impacts it might have on problem gambling and so forth. So that is bound, those bigger policy questions are quite heavily bound up in also how we fund the board and move it on that pathway to self-sufficiency. But as with all of our regulatory entities in the province, others like, for example, the Western Cape Liquor Authority, the intention is remains over time to move towards self-sufficiency, and the other way of putting that is that in a regulated industries, they pay for the costs of their own regulation rather than that being taken from the fiscus in general. So that is something that we are continuing to pursue, but it is bound up quite heavily in the broader reforms to border reforms and dynamics in the gambling industry. So it is going to be an incremental process rather than a sudden shift. Murray, you asked on digital transformation in the department. I mean, there's a lot of detail that I think can be provided here in terms of the sorts of dashboarding that we are doing, and I'll hand over to my colleagues Jelena Gantana, Isaac Smith, and Apiwe to talk Mazomba to talk through some of the integration work that's been done, some of the dashboarding that is already available, and others that are planned. I just wanted to make one point is that in doing so, it's not just the digital systems, but it's also making sure that we've got the skill sets to continually innovate in this environment and respond to user needs. So we work very closely with the CEI in this respect, and are making considerable investments in our own staff to be able to use and innovate with technology. And I must say, the results of that training continually amaze me as I see various reports coming through where you can clearly see the application of data visualization techniques, advances in data integration, and so forth, whether that's in our supply chain environment where we do detailed deep dives on a quarterly basis, or whether it's in our local government environment where both monthly and quarterly we're integrating very large data sets to track trends. But it's very important that it's not just for us from an oversight perspective. It's also for the front line. to be able to get as real-time data as possible on dynamics in their own spending and in their own performance. But I think Jalinda, Isaac, and Apiwe would be very happy to speak around that. And then just finally on the challenges of moving from compliance to from conformance to performance, as we like to put it, is that there will always be challenges in a system that has put considerable effort in getting the basics right, in terms of building our governance platform in the Western Cape, is now trying to leverage, making sure that we are leveraging that for service delivery outcomes. I want to just give an example of the supply chain management environment where compliance is probably, the biggest issue, because it is a complex, highly regulated environment to navigate for frontline managers. What we've recently done, and I think it reflects the sort of culture shift we're trying to execute in the province, is we've undertaken, and alongside key departments, in partnership with them, we've undertaken a problem-driven iterative adaptation process or review of challenges in the supply chain environment, to unpack what are the challenges, and how do we act to try and release some of those challenges. Now, often those challenges are said to be regulatory. What's been very interesting in this process is they're much more, the challenges actually at a root cause are much more behavioral. They're to do with our cultures, knowledge, support, and so forth. And they've indicated where we can, as the provincial treasury, start to build systems, and where departments can start to build systems in the and cultures in the supply chain management environment that can really make the shift. I raised that, and Isaac Smith has led that process and can talk to it a little bit more if the committee is interested, because it is, I think, a fascinating and critical piece of work. But I raise it because it really does reflect where we're trying to position as a treasury, not just oversight and the stick, but being a partner to solve problems that are being experienced, frictions that are being experienced in the service delivery process, and understanding in that what is it that departments are trying to achieve, and how we can use a supply chain management systems within the scope of the regulatory environment to help them achieve that, to enable them to achieve those service delivery objectives and impacts that they're looking for. And it has revealed, as I said, that the problems cannot be purely described as regulatory. It's not just the rule set that needs to change. So it's been a very interesting exercise. But let me hand over on the digital transformation question to Jalinda, Isaac, and Apiwe. Can just talk a little bit more around the dashboarding and the integration of data sets in terms of the first question that you asked. Thank you, Jalinda.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. Actually, I think the dashboarding Isaac will deal with, but I'd like also to bring Nadia in, because I think there's a lot of it that's happening on the supply chain side as well. Isaac?
Thank you, Jalinda. Good morning, members. So I'll touch a little bit on the more the ICT part, dashboarding, and then also maybe link it to the PDIA approach that the HOD have referred to, and then Nadia and Apiwe can come in on some of the areas that's their responsibility. Just in terms of the digital environment, and it links up to the earlier question that was asked by a member from the West Station on the IFMS. Now, yeah, we're waiting for a long time for the IFMS. Now, part of the IFMS was particularly the BI, the business intelligence would have been part of the BI, and it would have assisted us quite a lot as far as financial information is concerned. And because of the delay in the IFMS, it prompted us to start with initiatives. that the data that we've got in the legacy systems to deal much better with the data. So you will also see that in terms of the additional money that was given to us, focus on the creation of the data warehouse. So our intention, and we already underway with that, is to get all of the information in the legacy systems and dump it into the data warehouse. And we've got the National Treasury as well as CI that's assisting assisting us with that. And what we're then doing, we're then using the Microsoft BI tool. That's our intention, to build the dashboards. So we've started with that, as the HOD have indicated, that some of our members have already undergone training both on Tableau during the London School of Economics. We've also, some of our members have done the Microsoft BI tool as well. So we're training, of course, the members in the different units to fully understand the whole issue of dashboarding and how to analyze data. It is how important to analyze data. The data needs to be clean, and hence dumping the data into the data warehouse and ensure that our officials understand the data. So that's a big drive, and it actually is part of our whole initiative of modernizing the legacy system. So that is just on the financial side. Now, over these years, that different components in Treasury, and as you're well aware, we're data-driven, have done their own reports. And the intention is that once we've cleaned up this data and dump it in the data warehouse, that we then develop integrated reports. As David have said, there is already a move for the quarterly reports to be integrated, but there's quite a lot of work that still needs to be done as far as integration is concerned. We've moved ahead as far as the supply chain management is concerned, and particularly using the information in BAS, Logos, and then of course also the procurement system. And Nadia can maybe just explain a little bit that, as far as the reporting is concerned on that particular issue. And then, of course, particularly in terms of the in-year reporting. So there is a group within the public finance that's undergoing the Microsoft BI tool training. And what we've seen is that, once all our officials are able to use the tool, it will enable us to do much better reporting as we're going along. So that is the focus on the financial systems. But our focus is not only on the financial systems as far as data is concerned. We've developed the PTE vision strategy, and the focus is both on financial information and non-financial information. And as I've indicated, we're looking at the building of this warehouse, and it's not only the financial information that we want to push into that warehouse, but also the non-financial information. And we're also busy to look at some of our governance tools, both on the provincial and the local government side. And the intention is also, hopefully, over the short and medium term, to also get the municipal data in that particular warehouse. So it enable then all the officials within the Treasury to have got access to all of the information that will enable us to deliver a much better service to both departments and municipalities. Just then touching on the problem-driven iterative adaptation approach on procurement. One of the issues that were highlighted in that particular exercise, and we're focusing on the problem statement, which have been developed, which indicates that procurement is a hindrance or stumbling block, or can be a stumbling block for service delivery. One of the issues that came out there is the whole issue of automation, in terms of the systems that we've got and whether these systems integrate with one another. Hence, we're also busy with the process together with CEI and focusing on all the applications that's been used by the departments. And that's then driven under Apiwe Mazomba, who's our director systems, where we're looking at, apart from the legacy systems, what are the other systems that's also being used in departments, and how can we rationalize and streamline that that will enable us to, at the end of the day, to modernize the financial legacy systems. So those are the projects that's underway, and we'll probably come later to. There will probably questions on the additional funding that's been allocated. So quite a bit of the funding that's been allocated it's actually attached to that particular space in taking the treasury forward from a digital perspective. So I just want to give maybe Apiwe just come in, and then Nadia, particularly in terms of how we're using the digital space for supply chain. Thank you.
Thanks very much, members, and let me perhaps start with the question also, and to further expand on the HOD's response on the IFMS. So yes, in terms of the IFMS, it has taken us, at least 15 years to this point that we have not been able to implement IFMS, and this is due to a number of things, which includes the delays within SETA. To get an appointment of a service provider that will then implement the IFMS. It also includes some decisions that need to be taken between DPSA as well as National Treasury on the technology choice, whether we keep the already procured EBS system, which is a very old system as well, and will not be supported after 2032. Or move towards a cloud implementation. And so those are some of the decisions that are still hanging that need to be made by National Treasury, and that's caused now the delay that we have. I agree with you, Member van der Westhuizen, in terms of saying the top-down approach, doesn't always pan out well, and I think the HOD has actually touched on that. We are looking at different models and lessons learned, which includes the Estonia model, where they've done this successfully, and we're learning from that. And we're looking at different ways of implementing this within the Western Cape government. Of course, the focus now is on us modernizing the legacy systems, because those are national systems that we should be utilizing to support the transactions that occur within government. So just in terms of then the digital transformation, and thanks very much, Member More, in terms of the question there. So yes, it has been touched on that we are focused quite heavily on integrated reporting, and this includes us investing a lot in terms of the Microsoft Azure platform, which our CEI colleagues are supporting us with, to create this data warehouse where all data, financial and non-financial data, will then be housed. It is key for us to house it within the Western Cape government, purely because of also the POPIA issues that may creep in terms of the personal information that should not be seated anywhere else, but within the government frame. Chair just also mentioned that, yes, we have seen quite a lot of value in terms of the courses that we've sent our data stewards to attend in terms of the data analysis course. And I do see that there is much improvement in terms of how we're also utilizing data within the Provincial Treasury. In terms of some of the reports that we already have, I mean, we have well over 40 reports on just on PERSAL that we issue as daily audits, weekly, monthly reports that are coming through there, which also support the annual report in terms of the data that is sitting there, annual financial statements, which is utilized by the CFOs. We also utilize quite a lot of the data that sits on the Logis system, and this deals with the commitments, the assets that are being bought by the state. We keep tight track on that, as well as reporting that comes from there. Also the expenditure, and in particular, we'll be focused now on the energy, where we'll also be tracking expenditure on that. So yes, quite a bit happening in this space, and there is technology behind it. And we're quite happy that there is an investment in the space of digital transformation within the PT, because that will help us achieve our 2030 vision towards a digitally enabled treasury. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I really do appreciate the very detailed responses received. It's absolutely fantastic to hear that despite the challenges that you may be facing from national, that you've gone over and above your mandate and are really doing excellent work in the space of digital transformation. Members, are there any follow-up questions with regards to the introductory remarks? Okay, I see none. I do have just one follow-up, but actually for the sake of time, I'll hold it over and I'll use it in my budget-related question. So members, what I will do instead is I will put the entire budget to you now, where you can ask questions. So that would be the consideration of vote 3 for Provincial Treasury, pages 83 to 130 of the budget book. Members, if you could please indicate whether you have a question by raising your hands. If I can ask that in order to manage the questions, that you please put 2 questions at a time, and then we'll go on a further round-by-round basis. I recognize Member van der Westhuizen, but I recall that Member Nkontlo also had a question. So firstly, Member van der Westhuizen, and then Member Nkontlo.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the responses to my first questions. Chair, I do first a general question, and that is that I think since the briefing on Tuesday and the tabling of the budget in Parliament, there seems to have been some movement in terms of the public sector salary negotiations. And my first question would be just, the figures that we have in front of us, to what extent can we therefore now, still accept that these will be the figures that will apply for the upcoming year, particularly when we talk about the compensation of employee budget load. Then the second one is, I do note that of the 4 programs, there seems to be a bit of a shift towards program 1, which is administration. And if I may say so, slightly at the cost of some of the other programs. And perhaps if we could just get some clarity as to the thinking behind that. Why administration sounds a little bit less service orientated, if I can call it like that. And I would love to know, what is the thinking of even in some cases, like in the case of some of the other programs, there's a bit of a shrinking in terms of the support that they would be getting if you allow for inflation, etc. Perhaps if I could just get some clarity regarding the strategy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Member Nkontlo? Just want to check, Member Nkontlo, would you still like to ask a question? We are looking at the entire budget now.
No, thank you, Chair. I think it's just my buttons of this computer just doing some tricks this morning. Good morning to the Minister, HOD, and the team and the colleagues that are on the platform. Chair, on page 87, on the public policy services, I'm interested if the department can just give what were the results from the provincial and local government fiscal policy research that they've done, which, as they indicate, has actually led them to the development of that sustainable fiscal framework that they are referring to. So I'm interested to know what exactly are those salient issues that they would have picked up from that to share with us, and if any of that work in terms of the current budget, what are those things that we can sort of look at or will be focused in this financial budget? Actually, in such, if HOD can explain, because one of the things we always get as a discussion point around this matter is also separation of powers, where at times when you also ask this nexus between the 3 spheres or the two spheres, province and local government, you are reminded of these spheres being independent, and how would you have navigated that from a fiscal point of view, that aspect? So that's just my first question. My second question, Chair, is once again maybe to build on the issue of the COE budget management. In page 88, I think if one just considers how the department, we've spoken about how they are managing headcount to ensure that fiscal discipline is attained on that aspect. Now, the question I want to understand is, because this department will be looking at COE from a finance point of view, because I'm assuming that that function is the one that is done under that unit that is in the Premier's office. But my interest here is that if we consider, once again, a conversation we normally are dealing with, the increase in population size in the province, and versus what has been the budget containment in as far as COE is concerned. So what I'm trying to understand, what has been that movement, HOD, of how do you mitigate, particularly your service delivery departments, which by virtue of increase of population size, there would be increased demand of services, as obviously there's always been a cry by this provincial government to National Treasury in terms of resource allocation to augment such. So how do you then mitigate and mediate around cost containment, such demands that come from that? And actually, as part of that, particularly in this department, what would be the consultants' work percentage-wise that you have to deal with that actually supplements, the personnel that would have had to do the work in the department? Because I know that Auditor General for some time now, year in and year out, has been raising the notion of outsourcing, because capacity of the state is on everybody's tongue to say we need inbuilt capacity to do particular work that we have been over time having to outsource as special skills. So that's why I'm trying to understand from this department in particular, what would you say is your percentage spent to consultant versus what you have as technical capacity? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Member. I recognize Member Seleko.
Good morning, Chair, once again. Allow me to greet the Minister and the entire department, starting from the HOD. Chair, I will abide by your request of only 2 questions. And mine is in terms of the formula for funding for local municipalities. I would just like to know from the department, has there been any engagements in terms of relooking at how municipalities in entirety within our country has been funded? And because we all know that there's always been an outcry that there are underfunded mandates, unfunded mandates, and the majority of municipalities are struggling to cope. And I would just want to know whether there is any discussions for the future that we have to relook at how we are currently funding municipalities. And also, Chair, in terms of page 99, there's a mention of about an amount that was unspent in the 2022-23 of about 381,000, which was meant for municipal intervention, which was unspent. Can the department give me more details in terms of the reason why that amount was unspent? And yeah, I will stick to the 2 for now. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you sticking to those 2 questions for now. I would also like to ask a question related to page 111. So my question, just going back to the data management and the integration systems there, the department has really piqued my interest there. And I'd like to get a better understanding of whether the department sees any future applications that could result out of this, and also whether they are making use of data that we might have from our health service, from, for example, social development, where we could get more nitty-gritty information. And when I ask about applications, I'm interested because perhaps this could assist us in our attempt to have a more evidence-driven and database approach to, for example, fighting crime. Or perhaps it could assist us in understanding challenges around citizenry, defining that, and maybe supporting Home Affairs in the work that they do in the Western Cape. I think the applications of having such access to data are immense. And so I would really like to know if this is being considered and maybe what the way forward is in terms of the use of this data, other than I think the department put it as financial and non-financial data, maybe to understand what that non-financial data is. Perhaps I'll hand over to the Minister first and then to the HOD. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the members for a wide range of questions. I'm going to ask the HOT to respond on the questions on COE. There were a number of those. Fiscal discipline versus increasing population, and he'll take us through the COE strategy that is bespoke for each department. And then the question on consultants. I wonder if the CFO could take the question on the shift to Programme 1. Then I'll ask Mr. Kenyon to take those questions on local municipalities. And then just to say to Honourable Sileko that we do engage with National Treasury and the Department of COGTA via the Budget Forum, where there are consultations, and we do get to raise issues as a province, but there is more other kinds of engagements on a technical level, which the team will talk you through shortly, as well as that underspend for municipalities. And then, of course, the team will take your question, Chairperson, on future applications and getting data, because we do have very wealthy data from other departments within the government, and how do we kind of pull it all together in a way that is meaningful and useful, not only from a financial perspective, but also from a planning perspective. HOT, I'm going to hand over to you, please.
Great, thank you. And I will hand over most of these questions to the teams because they're the specialists in each of these areas. I just pick out of just one or 2 points. The member for Westhuizen on the public sector wage negotiations. Obviously, this is happening in real time. So it's really too early to tell, is the simple answer, the straight answer to your question. We do get updated in our intergovernmental engagements in the Technical Committee on Finance, and I'm sure at our next meeting, which I think is in a week or two, we will get an update on the wage negotiations and the implications of that and how we're going to respond nationally to that. We do have considerable precedent in how we respond to these things, so that there's an ongoing conversation on those issues. I'll ask the CFO to respond firstly to your question on the shifts from Programme 1 and some of the shifts in Programme 3 and 4. The member in Kondlo, I will ask Shirley Robinson to respond on some of the fiscal policy research, the salient issues and what's forthcoming. You asked a policy question though on how do we navigate the kind of fiscal dynamics across spheres of government. The Constitution puts a lot of emphasis on cooperative governance and interdependence rather than independence, and that's certainly the way we operate in navigating these issues. So we play both a monitoring and an oversight role for local government, which we undertake on a continuous basis, both monthly and quarterly. But we also engage with our municipalities regularly in much more detail and qualitatively through the year. the various challenges or fiscal challenges that they're facing. And so we both have strategic conversations with them as part of inputs into their budgeting process, and technical engagements with them on a bespoke basis on aspects of budget execution, budget implementation. And we aggregate that information not only to make sure we are understanding what's going on in the Western Cape and our municipalities, but also so that we can take those concerns into national fora in this respect. So one of the things that the minister's actually just introduced is a Provincial Governance and Budget Council, where she is meeting regularly now with all of the executive heads of finance across our municipalities. And we had our first one, I think, about 8 weeks ago in Caledon, which was very, very successful and allowed them to raise issues. At the national level, there are structures of intergovernmental relations that in the Treasury environment work very well. We have, as I mentioned earlier, a technical committee on finance, which is the HODs of the Provincial Treasury meeting with National Treasury. That meets on a very regular basis, pretty much fortnightly, and covers a broad range of issues. We also engage in what are known as 10 by 10s, where the provinces meet, the provincial treasuries and national treasury meet with other sectors. So, for example, next week I'll be in an economic sector, 10 by 10. We'll be meeting where the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition and Economic Development will be with us, with the finance family, to discuss issues of multiple of mutual concern. That then goes to the political level through the budget forum for local government and the budget council for provincial and national government as part of the budget process, as enshrined in the Intergovernmental Fiscal Relations Act. And so those there are, I think, very robust processes with good technical backup that allow us to navigate the concept of interdependence and cooperative governance and joint decision making on a range of issues that come our way. I will ask Annelies Pick to just speak to our COE strategy, other than to say, of course, Member Nkhondo, you're absolutely right. Our service delivery departments, it's not about it's not about kind of unreasonably managing headcount growth. And in fact, if you look in the budget as a whole, you will see that our frontline services are that their headcounts are expanding. There have been significant expansions to teaching posts that you'll see on the votes of the Department of Education, and significant expansions to social worker posts that are on the Department of Social Development. There is a rebalancing, as we spoke about in the Budget Committee, on the health side. It's a complicated exercise to manage this, and why we don't believe that a one-size-fits-all approach is appropriate across the province. The CFO, on your question, there was sub-question related to COE in the department and the percentage spent on consultants. The CFO can provide the data on that as well. And then I'll ask Stephen Kenyon to come in on Member Seleku's issues on local government, and I will come back on the just to say for Member Murray, just to add to what the minister said in that respect. The question you're asking around how do we bring more real-time non-financial data, which is both economic or contextual data, as well as service delivery data, into the frame, is exactly what we're working on with reporting reforms, both in the local government and in the provincial government environment. And you would have seen in the presentation we brought to Budget Committee on Tuesday exactly that we're starting to look at what is the economic, what is crime data saying, what is on a real-time basis, and how is that relating to spending trends. Now, obviously, departments themselves You collect that data. The Provincial Data Office, which is in the Department of the Premier, actually is the pivot point for that data as well. But we work very closely with the departments and with the Provincial Data Office in putting those reports together, and you can see the journey we're on, which I think is really quite exciting. It's a topic in its own right, quite correctly. So I won't go into more detail on it here, but we are very actively looking at that. The big challenge is, how do you get real-time data or proxies for real-time or proxy data that gives you a real-time feel of what's happening in service delivery in particular areas across the province and in the economy and around socioeconomic conditions in different areas of the province. So it's a real frontier for us, a very exciting and important one. Let me go then first to the CFO on the questions of the shifts P1, and then also on the question of consultants, and then I'll go to Ms. Robinson, Ms. Pick, and Mr. Kenya. Thank you.
Good morning, members and Chairperson. Just to latch on to the response by the HOD with regards to the public sector wage agreement or wage increases. As you will see on page 100 of the document, our key assumptions is that there were no provision made for improvement of conditions of service, except for the 1.5% pay progression and the carry-through cost of the 2022 adjustments, and then also increases with regards to medical aid and housing. So just to answer the question, if depending on the outcome of the wage negotiations, we will either have to get additional funding or reprioritize within the budget, because we did not make provision for that. But I think that's not only for this specific vote, but also for all of the other votes. So I think that's transversal to all of the other votes. With regards to Program 1, the shift to Program 1, or maybe it's just a strategy, you will see that Program 1 consists about 19% of the votes budget. Usually it's higher than I think the norm. I think the norm is about 10% for the administration. What happens within the Provincial Treasury, within Program 1, there are a number of provisions made for what we call transversal items. For example, purchasing of the laptops. It is done within Program 1. The GG vehicles, those payments is done out of Program 1. So there's a number of items that's budgeted and paid out of Program 1, but is for all of the other programs. I think you will see there's quite a huge increase from the 22-23 to the 23-24 financial year, and I think that is with regards to the modernization. HSD spoke in his opening remarks about the modernization process, and the entire funding for the modernization is in Program 1, even though it will also cross-cut over Program 1 and Program 2, the modernization project, but it's just managed within Program 1. And then with regards to the consultants, yes, and if I just look at our number of posts vacant, number of posts unfunded, because we do have a number of posts unfunded, it's about 30, and then we have a number of posts within the recruitment and selection process, it's 23. So yes, but we try to, like I said, optimize the utilization of our staff members to be able to deliver on what we promised to deliver within our APP. With regards to consultants, yes, there are some projects that we use consultants for example, for the Pero and the Mirror, but we have also got more staff members involved in the Pero and the Mirror process. So there is a skills transfer. So hopefully over time we can do most of those functions internally. So we do have a strategy to ensure that there's transfer of skills and that we reduce our consultants. You will also see that in the that we have nominally reduced the consultants in the 23-24 financial year. Thanks.
Thank you. Can I go then to Ms. Robinson?
Thank you, Chair and members, Minister and HOT. So I am going to respond to the member's question around the provincial and local government research and public policy services, which I head. And I'd like to take a continuation or a continuum perspective that the research is not done while it's done in teams. The thinking and the thought process or the conceptual process is from socioeconomic context into understanding the fiscal response and the fiscal framework response of both provincial and local government, into understanding a budget response, so that your budget responds into an economic context. So in that respect, our CFO has just spoken about our key publications on the Provincial Economic Review and Outlook, the PERO, and the sister publication, the Municipal Economic Review and Outlook and MERO. We're doing quite a lot of innovations in that. While they are undertaken by consultants, the conceptualization is from our teams. And as the HOT has often very succinctly put, the consultants are specialist technical assistants that we would not necessarily want to employ long term, but we need for short term specialists, particularly on the economic key parts. We then take it into the fiscal policy aspects, and there being key research papers, particularly on the changes on the equitable share, members. As they've been it's quite a dynamic framework given the national fiscal constraint. And so the team led by Mr. Malcolm Boyson on this call as well has been engaging on an understanding of the data and the formula changes, particularly on the health risk adjusted formula. And we are also looking ahead to the education policy or the education component changes. That then moves very nicely into the Fiscal Futures Project, which was another consultancy-driven project that will institutionalize over time. Members will be happy to note that we have just got our first draft report, and so that's some of the spending on this program as well. And we'll move into a sandbox where the team start to play with particular scenario-driven options over time, so that we get an understanding of the dynamics that affect the fiscal framework. And in our own field of management, our gambling policy, so understanding the change in the gambling terrain, and the HOT also talked about it, and that we have quite a lot of gambling research that has been undertaken, both internally in terms of understanding the gambling and the dynamics of the revenue base as well as consultant-driven, as we start to move to a evidence base that underpins gambling policy review and legislative changes coming forth. I hope members and chair, that is a sufficient response. My colleague Stephen Kenyon, when he responds on the local, will take some of the local aspects when he does the response. And there are also expenditure reviews, which are a complementary complement to the suite of research. Thank you, Minister and Chair and members.
Then I go to Ms. Pick, I think, just to talk around compensation.
Thank you. On compensation of employees, yes, as ministers indicated, as well as the head of treasury, is in terms of we're looking at in terms of a differentiated approach on our COE strategy. So we make sure that we actually understand firstly the context of service delivery for each of those departments, and in terms of what are the drivers there behind, and then also in terms of what they need to respond to. So for the service delivery departments, mostly you'll see in terms of this budget, when we compare the current financial year headcount in terms of the new NTF headcount, there is in terms of increases. So for example, I'll just read to you just in terms of that headcount increase for education. Headcount increase is projected to increase from 44,600 approximately to 46,800 for education in terms of headcount. In terms of social services, and this is mostly in terms of social workers, it's predicting to increase from 2,500 to about 2,700 in this MTEF. And then, as we indicated in to the budget committee on health, health finds itself in a different position than than other service delivery departments, and this is the entire health sector. Obviously, number one, the impact of COVID, where they have increased the number of staffing, especially on contract, and now they're having to decrease in terms of those staffing numbers, and then also in terms of the impact that the equitable share has had on the health sector. It's also then indicated that the health sector's platform needs in terms of a redesign, and that would impact the COE as well. But what this budget does is try to, that the reduction of the COE headcount, we try to make that in terms of as slow as possible over the MTF, so that for the Department of Health, the reduction of COE is about natural attrition of looking at in terms of retirement of posts, and also looking at in terms of the contract posts that will not be renewed. So we try to mitigate for the health department as much as we could. Then in terms of just overall then for COE going forward and what the strategy is, now that we've got in terms of, let's say, the headcount under control within the province, it is now looking at labor productivity. We're finding that within departments, there are pockets of efficiencies and pockets, let's say, of non-efficiency at this stage. And so we are looking at the departments as part of their own differentiated COE strategy, is for them to come up with targets around efficiencies and labor productivity, to make sure in terms of that, number one, in terms of that we are increasing our labor productivity, number one, and then to look at in terms of what then is in terms of the next level for each of the departments, because they all find themselves in different contexts. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And then if I can go to Mr. Kenyon, the last two questions from Member Select Group.
Thanks very much. I'm going to address the questions in kind of reverse order. So on the underspending on the interventions, this is quite a tricky area for us, because you're responding to a municipality that is obviously under intervention because there have been financial problems in the municipality. So particularly with respect to making a transfer to that municipality, I think members would understand why the Provincial Treasury would be very cautious before making any transfer. And in fact, what you'll see if you look over the last 2 years, the shift that the department has made is to rebalance how we distribute the pot of funds that we have available to support interventions. So it used to be that most of that money was budgeted for transfers to the municipalities that are under intervention. And what we've done is to shift more of that money into consultant services. So for people that we can pay from the provincial department and deploy to provide support in the municipality. And also we've shifted a little bit of the money to support cost of employment staff capacity within the Provincial Treasury to oversee interventions, because our staff do spend a lot of time. It's a very labor-intensive process overseeing an intervention. However, we do think there are still projects that in a municipality under intervention where a small amount of money can assist municipalities with fixing systems, implementing revenue enhancement mechanisms, where a relatively small amount of money, capital from the Provincial Treasury, can help to accelerate the turnaround of a municipality. However, in the previous financial year, which I think is the period Honourable Seleko is asking about, The situation was that we had an intervention in place in Kannaland municipality and we're preparing possible projects there. However, in October of 2021, the courts ended that intervention in the municipality, so they were no longer eligible to receive funds from that. So, you know, we couldn't then transfer. And then we now have Beaufort West under intervention, but that intervention only formally began in March of 2022. So just before the end of the financial year. So we also couldn't make a transfer then. So that's why in the specifics, no transfer was made and that funding was underspent, but also just in general, the point that we are very cautious and on principle would rather incur the underspending than make a kind of a risky transfer. And I'm sure members would understand that point in principle. And then I really appreciate the question that Honourable Sileko asks about the engagements on the funding formulas and the unfunded mandates, etc. And I know that we gave quite an extensive briefing to him and his committee in his other capacity in the local government committee side the other day. So I won't touch too much on the unfunded mandates aspect of the question, but just on the funding formulas, I think the head of department gave a very comprehensive outline to the intergovernmental processes that we go through to engage National Treasury and other stakeholders. And the minister also touched on the budget forum where we have those engagements. I just wanted to give a tangible example from the last year of one of the areas in which we did that work and some success that we had that members can see in the Division of Revenue that the National Minister of Finance tabled and that will be coming to the Western Cape Provincial Legislature as part of those consultations. So, I mean, it's only one aspect. I want to emphasize that it's not an overhaul of the main local government equitable share formula, but in the funding for district municipalities, Western Cape district municipalities don't have water service authority functions. Those are performed by local municipalities in this province. As is the case for roughly half of the districts in the country. And the way that the main source of funding for district municipalities is something called the RSC Levies Replacement Grant. And National Treasury took a decision more than a decade ago that the growth rate for transfers to district municipalities that are non-water service authorities like ours would be 1/3 of the growth rate to the water service authority districts. So in practical terms, that meant that our districts get a growth rate, we're getting a growth rate of about 2.2%, whereas the water service authorities were getting a growth rate of something closer to 7% each year. And you can imagine that makes it very difficult to budget for cost of employment, fuel, other costs that are growing by roughly in line with inflation if you're only getting 2.2% growth. So this was a long-standing complaint of our districts. We workshopped with the districts around various options. We spent 2 days sitting with the district CFOs, and this was work coordinated from Shirley's team, Malcolm, and the fiscal policy team that were noted earlier. And we kind of workshopped with them what would make the biggest difference and what was plausible in the system. And then using the FFC recommendation response process this year as well, where there happened to be a recommendation around district funding, the Provincial Treasury made a proposal, worked through in some detail around a change to those growth rates and an equalization. And we really built, thanks to the work with the CFOs and the research of the fiscal policy team, quite a strong case around the need for a change after a decade of implementation. And then that change was then discussed in those budget forum meetings that our MEC represents the province in with the National Minister, and we strongly supported that change there. So the net result is that in this year's Division of Revenue, they have implemented the change. We didn't get everything we wanted. We wanted the change implemented immediately. National Treasury chose rather to phase in the change. So this year, instead of getting a 2.2% growth rate, municipalities get 2.9%, which is not a big change. But next year, the growth rate is 4.5%, and then the year after 6%, which is where we want it to be. And just in terms of rand values for what difference that makes, if you add up the change across the 5 districts in the province, it adds up to just over 4 million rand in the first year, so not a lot, divided over 5 municipalities. In the second year, though, it's 17 million, and by the outer year, it's just under 40 million rand additional that comes to this province that wouldn't have come if it hadn't been for those engagements, that process that we ran, listening to the districts, and then engaging through those intergovernmental forums. And our proposal on the broader local government equitable share formula and conditional grants, the MIG, etc., is to follow exactly that same approach. And in fact, one of my colleagues, our director for MFMA coordination, is not in the committee this morning. Apologies from him, because he's at the Municipal Managers Forum explaining exactly the same strategy to them. So we want to, again, listen to municipalities on their needs, and then take those through those intergovernmental processes and do the best we can to negotiate positive changes. Thanks, Chair.
I think that's the questions answered, Chair, for that round.
Thank you very much. I must thank you again for your very, very detailed responses, and I do believe you've covered all of the questions in great detail. Members, I will open up for a second round. Kindly raise your hands to indicate whether you have a question. I recognize Member van der Westhuizen, and then I'll start with Member van der Westhuizen.
My hand is up, Chair. I'm just struggling with my thing this morning, with my buttons.
All right, I saw it went up and down, and all right, so we'll go to Member van der Westhuizen, then we'll go to yourself, and then we'll go to Member Seleko, whose hand has also disappeared.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the explanation and the detail regarding the support to local governments. I think we in the Western Cape are very proud annually of the Auditor General findings in terms of our local governments. But I think we also know that, our local governments differ in size quite vastly, and that it's particularly the smaller ones, which tend to be the rural ones, that struggle to attract the necessary capacity in terms of staff, etc., to come and work in those smaller municipalities. Obviously, your chances for promotion, your chances to be recognized, etc., is so much bigger when you work in the city of Cape Town than when you work in a smaller municipality. And we also have this interesting thing that municipalities are graded, and that the maximum salaries that they can offer to prospective employees are linked to the size of the municipality. Now, this long introduction just to say that my expectation would be that our focus and our support should be on the smaller municipalities when it comes to financial support. Now, if we look at the pages, and I would love the officials to just dwell a little bit more on pages 125, 126, 127, and 128 for the support. I, for example, would not have expected that the city of Cape Town would need support from province to, in terms of their financial management capabilities. But I would expect that quite a number of other municipalities, and particularly the smaller ones, would need that. Now, I haven't had the privilege to sit in the local government standing committee meeting, so perhaps without going into the exact figures, but that just the again, if I could understand the rationale of how was the decision taken as to which municipalities would be supported still, and which would now not be supported. And linked to that, in our engagements with local governments, they quite often see the regular reporting on their financials to various entities. I think they must send reports, obviously, to their councils. They must report to Provincial Treasury. They must report also to National Treasury. And I think there are also some reports going to South African Statistics, South Africa. they find this to be quite a burden. And my question therefore is, how do we assist the smaller municipalities with that burden? And that can link back to the development of the integrated financial management system. To what extent can these financial reports already be generated automatically by the software systems being used by municipalities? And having said that, I do realize that the regular report back that they give is not only of a financial nature. I do know that there are other aspects as well in terms of, let's say, the number of households with water-worn sewage systems, et cetera, that they also need to report on. But how do we decide, or how do you as a department decide onto which municipality should get what amount? Because what I see is not clear to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Member van der Westhuizen. And I think you raised a very interesting point. Yesterday in our local government standing committee, we were, for example, talking around challenges of attracting skilled individuals, engineers, directors, etc., to take up posts in challenging or challenged municipalities. And many were deterred from doing so. So I think it's an interesting question that you pose. I see Member Nsonko.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, whilst I appreciate the response about rationale, and what's happening in terms of this management of COE, my head is actually more with questions than answers after the explanation. And I'm raising this, I think, going back to the service delivery interfacing departments. As an example, the reference made to, departments like Department of Health, who, by virtue of the pandemic, had to use particular ways to innovate and bring in contract staff. But now they must lay off some of that staff. So for me, what I'm not getting, to make sense of this strategy, is how are you dealing with such incidents, and I would use that term incidents in terms of the COVID, and using the health environment as an example, with the fact that there is a steady increase, as we have been seeing, of population size. So if you say to me during COVID, I had to deal with 50 people, and I had to increase my staff to 20 people, and I must reduce now to 15. The truth of the matter is that, the increase of the people that you have to service, is continuing. Such to me does not make any logical sense. So this is one thing that I was trying to understand, particularly on that question on COE and maintaining that balance. So I would be very happy if indeed, there is some better clarity, more specific about those kind of balancing. My new question, Chair, is that if we consider what is in know about the closure since they started.
Apologies, I'm not sure if it's just me, but you seem to be cutting out a little bit. Can I just check with others on the call?
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Member van der Westhuizen, did you hear any interruption, or was that on my side? I just want to make sure Member Nkondlo's question was audible.
Yeah, there were some interruptions, but I think we can follow the gist of what she's asking. Thank you.
Okay, Member Nkondlo, if you could please just repeat that last question, or start again, just so we make sure that we have the entire question. Thank you.
Okay, my new question, Chair, is on the page 90 on the disclosure reports that the department has been doing well. And I want to check from the department that because this actually started and was triggered by a unique spending that government had to deal with in the case of COVID-19. and improving transparency, ensuring that there's less, capital outflows that you would get out of that. Is that if we consider at this point, we've got the electricity crisis as an example, and another thing that is actually starting to get into that emergency spending a type of a situation, why there is even a ad hoc committee that has been established now for this effect. Can I then ask the question whether the disclosure report, procurement disclosure report, will actually start also following the similar way of bringing that particular 1 billion spending that has also been announced by a minister, to ensure that also there's transparency about this particular spending that would now be ensued to try and manage the current crisis that we're in around electricity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Member. I think that's a very good question. Member Seleko, I saw your hand went up and then it went down. Did you have a question?
Thank you, Chair Lana. Thank you. Chair, thank you very much. I would also just want to start by Member Enriquez in terms of page 128. In terms of the Western Cape Financial Management Capacity grant, and I see there is only out of the majority of municipalities that have been allocated funding for the 23-24 year, there is less than 10. But if you look in terms of the revised estimates, but the majority of our municipalities, almost all of them had some funding. So can the department just explain the process the municipalities have to follow, if there is any, for them to be funded, or which process did the City of Cape Town follow to be granted 1 million, in the 23-24, whereas the majority of other municipalities did not benefit. And also, Chair, in terms of page 89, I know that Beaufort-Western has been put under section 139, subsection 5, in terms of a recovery plan. One would want to know from the department, is there any concerns that they would like to share with us in terms of progress being made in that particular municipality, or whether there are challenges, and if there are challenges, what challenges are those? And the other one is that on page 88, there's a wording that talks about an infrastructure unit. I would like to know more in terms of that infrastructure unit. How does it link with the different departments or municipalities? Just more detail on that. And as much as one welcome the funding that the districts within our municipalities are going to get, since they are no longer they are not WSAs as compared to other provinces. One is also cognizant to the fact that we see a lot of non-compliance in terms of MFMA and in our municipalities. And if one wants to really make sure that whatever we source actually adds value within our municipalities for the end user, one would want to know, what kind of work is the department doing to make sure that our MPECs are actually doing what is expected from them in terms of procurement processes, and also in terms of our SCM units within our municipalities. Is there any concerns that the department had picked up in terms of competence, qualifications, and the work that is expected from them? Thank you, Chair. That's all from my side.
Thank you, Member. I believe that was well over 2 questions. So for future, if there
My
are
apologies.
more questions, please try and keep it to 2. But thank you very much. Members have largely covered my own questions. So thank you very much for, having taken the time to really go through this and take this as seriously as you have. I guess my question, connecting into Member Seleko's question, is with regards to MFMA coordination, we've seen a huge increase of about 156%. And so just if we could get a better understanding of why this was prioritized, and also why is it that it was so important from a municipal level to show support to these municipalities. I will now hand over to the Minister and then to the HOD. If I could ask if you could please turn on your videos when you speak, and then I'll turn off mine as well, just to give you some airtime as well.
Thank you, Chair. All right, so quite a number of questions on municipalities. So I'll ask Mr. Kenyon and his team to tackle those. Honourable Kondlo's question on COE. So the Department of Health is not, just to clarify, is not laying off staff. It's just not renewing contracts. And they have a very difficult situation in that the funding that was provided for COVID is no longer there. That funding has now kind of dried up. And at the same time, the health sector has seen a decrease in terms of equitable share to provinces. And that has a real and tangible effect on provinces. So, for example, in our province, it's just short of 2 billion rand over the MTEF, which then does put the budget under significant strain. And of course, those difficult decisions then do need to be made. So there are funding problems as a result of the removal of COVID funding top-ups, and then also the decrease in equitable share for health. Then on Honourable Kondlo's question on the PDR, absolutely. The Procurement Disclosure Report is a government best practice which was pioneered during the COVID pandemic. And as we were coming out of the pandemic, the department was really trying to adapt and shift to see how this report could be relevant within our normal procurement practices. And then we're again in a state of disaster. So, of course, this PDR will now continue in a new iteration, which will be for energy procurement, so that we can make sure that procurement for energy-related expenditures are transparent, and that there can be accountability to ensure that supply chain follows the correct prescripts. At the moment, we're contemplating perhaps a quarterly report, but we'll have to see how things go, as it might be necessary to publish more regularly and perhaps on a monthly basis, depending on how quickly that expenditure does come along, especially with the large budgets associated with the energy spending. And then there was also a question on infrastructure. Perhaps HOT can deal with that one. And I think the rest all relate to municipalities. Thank you very much, Chair. HOT, let me hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Yes, I think the residual questions are largely to do with local government. On the infrastructure unit, our functions there are really twofold. The one is the management of the infrastructure delivery management system in accordance with the overall framework for infrastructure delivery and procurement management, which is a national framework. And so we do a lot of monitoring and consolidation of the infrastructure pipeline across the various folks who are actually responsible for the infrastructure spending. We are building out that function, and we're particularly looking at not specifically in this unit, but specifically looking at how we're providing more support to alternative forms of infrastructure financing. And that's something that goes along with the broader issues associated with the formation of the Department of Infrastructure in this year. In the forthcoming year. On the local government questions, I think on the detail of that has been asked, we can certainly get Mr. Kenyon to talk to some of the issues around grant allocation and so forth. I just wanted to say on the capacity support model for smaller municipalities, what we are quite actively exploring with some interesting early results is whether we can use a circuit rider sort of system. So we're not looking to go and place personnel permanently in municipalities. We do understand smaller municipalities do have difficulties attracting and retaining skills. And so we're looking at how we could use circuit rider sort of approaches where there's shared resources at a district level, or most likely that can move between municipalities and help maintain common systems. That will then lay a platform for us to start to look at sort of shared services where they're possible in some areas. So we're working with the Financial Management Improvement Program at National Treasury in that respect, and we have had a deployment of one staff member in Prince Albert, and also assisting in Lanesburg in that respect. So we do give that a focus. Most often it's not that the small municipalities necessarily want the money, but they want the actual warm bodies, the skills to help them establish and maintain systems. But our mandate doesn't stop there. Our big municipalities, our larger, more capacitated municipalities do face challenges, and they are often growth hubs. They are the places where where jobs are created by businesses across the province. So we do want to work with those municipalities, albeit on a different set of issues, to try and remove constraints they have in governance and administration and service delivery. And so that's where we can't avoid we must play a role in supporting those municipalities to reach for higher levels of growth, economic growth and development in their jurisdictions. Moreover, often in those cases, because we're working with pretty skilled personnel in the municipalities, there's an opportunity for us to generate cross-learnings. So what we might learn in a Mossel Bay or a George or a Cape Town will have provincial-wide relevance. And the only way for us to be able to transmit that to other municipalities is to be part of those processes, rather than just hope for the best. So we try to be quite targeted, both in terms of generating cross-learnings, but also in terms of supporting those municipalities and where they are, those stronger municipalities where they're driving aggressively for growth and development in their jurisdictions, through strengthening their budget systems. There is a process to the grant allocations that Mr. Kenyon can talk through. The key here is that we're in a process of grant reform, and this relates to Member Seleku's question, and the numbers that you're seeing there. We used to only allocate grant money much later in the year, and so there'll be no allocations that are published now. Now as we're in a process of reform here, through the allocation processes we follow, we're bringing forward those allocations in cases where we're able to already get municipalities across the line for support, and we're trying to eventually make those allocations much more multi-year in nature, rather than just being very input focused. For Member van der Westhuizen, I just wanted to clarify, local government is not part of the IFMS. There is a big technology and data reform program in local government, which generally goes by the name of the Municipal Standard Chart of Accounts, or MSCOA, which is not a full descriptor of actually what's going on. But that is a massive digitization of local government financial management practices, and automates a huge amount of the reporting. It's been very challenging to introduce, and a lot of our emphasis is on am I still there? Yes. A lot of our emphasis is on helping municipalities fully adopt MSCOA. But there is a reporting burden. Unfortunately, what you don't measure, you can't manage. And there is a need, I think, specifically on the non-financial side, to make that data or that reporting telescopic. In other words, what you need to know at municipal level is not what you need to know. It's a subset of that you need to know at provincial level, and so on. And so in the non-financial environment, that's been a particular challenge, and it continues to be one. We do understand the frustrations that municipalities have, particularly with non-financial data. But I think there's very good progress on digitization and streamlining of financial reporting. I'm just looking through the other issues. I think I'll ask Stephen Kenyon to talk to the grant allocation issues, Beaufort West, progress and challenges, the MFMA coordination, the budget increase there, which is reflective of our strategy. And then perhaps, Ms. Gantana, you can talk through some issues associated with MFMA non-compliance issues, the impacts and the assurance environment. Thank you. Over to you, Stephen.
Thanks very much, Head of Department. Good morning again, members. I'm going to try not to repeat too much of what the Head of Department's already covered, because I think he's given a nice kind of overview of the strategy. Just to emphasize the point that when we look at support to municipalities, the full MFMA team in the Treasury is providing that support, and the grant funding is just one component, and it's actually a relatively small component in the context of the overall budget. So we have a range of training initiatives that that municipalities participate across a wide range of areas, from accounting and governance to revenue management, etc. So we have a lot of training initiatives. We do and of course, the time of our staff is probably the most expensive thing on the Provincial Treasury's budget, and certainly most expensive on the MFMA team side. And that time, I think you would find, if you did the sort of time studies, we spend a disproportionate amount of that time in supporting those smaller municipalities. As the HOD says, a lot of what they need is hands-on advice and support. So I think that's very important to emphasize. And he's mentioned also that we even go to the extent of deploying staff on a semi-full-time basis to kind of provide hands-on support in municipalities. We also don't work in a vacuum. We're working closely with our partners in the province in DLG to coordinate the kind of support that we provide to a municipality to complement what they're doing, but also with our national partners. So there's a resource deployed in the Central Karoo municipalities, for example, from the National Treasury's municipal MFIP, Municipal Finance Improvement Program, who is full-time in the kind of circuit rider model that the HOD was talking to. So very much we do provide that hands-on support. I think also, I'm glad that the committee has talked already to, or members have already talked to DLG on these same issues, because I think what we would all say is a common observation across municipalities is that the main impediment to attracting skills to a municipality is not so much the size of the municipality, but the working conditions and stable governance in a municipality. If you have a difficult governance environment, frequent changes in political leadership, instability, being asked to do improper things, you're going to lose good staff. And that's certainly what we've seen from talking to people who've resigned from municipalities. Whereas if you're a well-run, stable governance environment, it's much, much easier to attract and to retain the good staff that you need. And we have examples of small municipalities with very capable people in this province who continue to do all of the necessary work to ensure that we have the municipalities that we are so proud of in the province. In terms of the specifics of the grant, because the grant is an important part of our suite of support. So let me explain how the allocations are made. As the HOD mentioned, we are in a process of reforming and improving the grant. So one of the things to note from that is that we're now making allocations in the budget that's tabled in March. Last year, you wouldn't have found allocations in this grant already because the allocation process took a lot longer, which meant that we only presented allocations per municipality in the adjustment budget. That's not great for transparency to yourselves, but it's also not great in terms of enabling municipalities to have a full year, a full municipal financial year to spend the funds. So I think it's a huge accomplishment that we've managed to change our cycles, our internal cycles, to get the allocations here. So that's a good start. Then the question of which individual municipalities are benefiting from those allocations. And the Western Cape Financial Management Capability Grant, which is what's funding these projects, the strategic goal of that grant is to create municipalities with strong financial management capabilities that can support service delivery and enable growth. And so I think it's important that you'll see in the mix of municipalities that are funded, we have a Cederberg that is a financially distressed municipality that's having some very tricky issues, and we're supporting a revenue enhancement project through the grant there. So with, you know, financial stability on that side. And then in a municipality like Cape Town, we're supporting that growth agenda. And the process to make those allocations is that municipalities apply for allocations. So we issued a call for proposals towards the end of last year. Proposals were submitted in January. We ran an assessment process and graded them against a set of criteria. And as the head of department's already indicated, one of those criteria is the ability to for the planned project to benefit more than one municipality. And so in the Cape Town example, their project is a new innovative initiative that has the potential to be replicated in other municipalities. And what it relates to specifically is electronic sign-offs on revenue clearance certificates. So it's quite an innovative technology-based project for a relatively small amount of money, only R1 million in the context of a very large city like Cape Town, that could speed up the processing of those certificates, which could enable some quite big economic benefits more broadly in making the property market, making the city more effective, which will help the property market in the city. And those same, if the project works in Cape Town, if we see positive results, the same technology, the same solution could be rolled out in other municipalities. So that's kind of how we think about that. But you'll see very much that there is a mix of municipalities that are funded there. The other component of this grant that I should also mention is that there is also a bursary funding component, and all municipalities benefit from that. But because of the alignment between the academic year and the municipal financial year, we haven't yet made those bursary allocations. We're also reviewing the impact of those bursary allocations and trying to kind of customize some of the grant changes there. So those allocations will be made in the adjustments budget as well. So we don't want to exclude any municipality from eligibility to the grant. All 30 municipalities in the province are eligible for grant funding, and we assess them against transparent criteria that are set out in the framework for the grant. And in Cape Town's case in particular, it was, I think, having been a member of the panel that reviewed it, I can say that it was that ability to be replicable that kind of put them over the top on that. I think on the Beaufort West intervention, I'm not going to speak at length there. The financial recovery plan that is being implemented in Beaufort West is quite a highly regulated instrument, and that includes requirements to report quarterly to National Treasury, and a copy of that report is also submitted to the Speaker and for Parliament. And we would be very happy to give a detailed briefing if invited on the progress there. It is a as we were mentioning earlier, a municipality is placed under intervention because they're experiencing difficulties. So there are, I think the question was framed in terms of progress and problems. There has been progress and there are problems. So in summary, we've made some progress in stabilizing the finances of the municipality. We have very time-intensive engagements with the municipality, day by day, managing their cash flow pressures. We've, over the first 3 months of the intervention, March to June, the municipality was still not able to reliably, March to June last year, was still not able to reliably pay Eskom every month. Since July, they have paid Eskom consistently and were able to, in January, sign a repayment arrangement with Eskom to account for the remainder of their debt. The announcement by the Minister of Finance on debt relief for municipalities with debt to Eskom will, we're still working out the details. The National Treasury has still to disclose the full details of that process, but that will provide further relief to them. But I think, with some ups and downs on the revenue collection, etc., we've provided support around that as well. The municipality's day-to-day finances are stabilizing, but we're not yet seeing necessarily the translation of those gains into improved service delivery. Which I think is ultimately what we and citizens really care about, is that the stabilized financial platform needs to translate into those improvements. But I should say that in terms of the timelines for the financial recovery plan, the plan itself sets out a 3-year plan towards achieving a financially sustainable Beaufort West. So we're not yet at the end of the first year of implementation. So, you know, I think we also have to be realistic about pacing where we expect to be on that. But as I say, we're very happy to give a fuller account there. On the question on the impacts, the Department of Local Government is actually the lead on impacts, so the provincial on support to impacts. So the provincial treasury, because it's so important to the work that we do, we provide extensive support to those processes, including training of councillors, etc., and participate very actively in that space. But I think it would be right that kind of questions on the overall support the response to that be led by the Department of Local Government. And then on the growth to and I'll ask the colleagues to come in on that and some of the supply chain issues as well. And just last from my side on the increase to the MFMA coordination unit, this is a unit that it has existed on paper in the provincial treasury for some time, but has never been fully capacitated and fully staffed. And as a result of that, it also didn't. So that's over the last year, we've kind of capacitated that, and that's part of why we've been able to do some of the stuff we have over the last year. And that unit, in fact, has taken responsibility for managing this grant that we were talking about earlier. And so some of the grant funds then also reflect on their budget as well. So both the full staffing and then the additional responsibilities that they're executing on, and you know, it was their work that really allowed us to move from making allocations in November to making them in March. That's the reason for that seemingly dramatic increase in the budget there, but it's kind of more of a shift of responsibilities from that were previously in other units. HOD, can we allow the colleagues, if they want to add on some of the accounting and SEM matters?
Yeah, let me hand over to Jalinda in that respect. Thank you. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, and thank you, Stephen. I think you started off by touching on the impact issue, but maybe just to indicate as part of our broader agenda in terms of governance transformation, and so the improvement of accountability and governance within the municipal space is important. And so with the amendments in terms of the Structures Act, yes, we do support, but like Stephen has already indicated, we don't do it on our own. There is a particular working relationship with the Department of Local Government, as well as with SALGA on this particular matter. And then the second part of the question dealt with the combined assurance. I'm going to ask Melissa van Niekerk just to expand, because there's a very specific focus in terms of our support to the different fora, which is bespoke. In addition to that, we are looking at issuing some guidance within the coming financial year around the combined assurance framework. And I'm going to ask Ajay just to expand to give the committee a better sense of what that would entail. There was a question on the SEM, and I think just to put it in context, because of the changes within legislation, I think what one would need to accept is that in as much as it is perhaps a capacity issue, we can couch it as that, but I think then there is a need for a change management approach in terms of a mindset approach, changes in that, in how one would deal with procurement. And I think as a PT, we recognize that, and then in addition to that, is beginning to form strategies in terms of how to continue to support municipalities through in terms of this ever-changing, and I think we are waiting for the one procurement bill, which will again require us to be agile in terms of our approach, but in also continuing to support not only municipalities, but also provinces, province in this regard. And I'm going to ask Isaac just to expand a little bit more on that particular issue with the support from Letitia. So Melissa, will you then just deal with the combined assurance work? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jalinda, and good morning to the committee members. So with regards to municipal assurance in terms of the risk management, the audit committee function, it really plays a critical role with regards to the governance approach that Jalinda referred to. And with regards to the medium-term strategy, it is looking at the readiness of municipalities to implement combined assurance, and it is towards that assurance that the risks are being mitigated and a more effective internal control systems in terms of the achievement of municipal objectives. We've identified that the building blocks for the implementation of combined assurance within the municipal environment is really looking at the effectiveness of our internal audit units and our risk management units. So we're really focusing on upskilling, with regards to the risk management and the internal audit units and bespoke, initiatives as well. We really wanted to provide guidance, to municipalities with regards to the combined assurance implementation. And so the departure point was a combined assurance framework. Importantly, with regards to the initiatives is to have collaboration with our municipalities and to make the guidance really bespoke to the local government environment. So we partnered with the Drakensberg municipality in terms of piloting the combined assurance framework, which was referred to by Jalinda, and we are planning, to issue that framework within the next, financial year. So that is also accompanied, as I indicated, by the upskilling. We have got our Chief Audit Executive, as well as the Chief Risk Officer Forum, that provides a platform, to municipalities in terms of identifying challenges and providing guidance. National Treasury also participates in that forum, and then also professional bodies as well. Also, just to indicate, in terms of our monitoring and how the support is informed, as indicated there, Stephen referred to the time process. So there are technical assessments that do take place, and that does inform, the support to the municipalities in terms of risk management, as well as in the internal audit function. Thank you, Jalinda. That's all from my side.
Thank you, Jalinda. Just on the supply chain side and from a capacity perspective, over these years, we've done numerous assessments at municipalities, and what we've found is that municipalities are on different levels of supply chain management maturity. And then, of course, there are quite a number of municipalities that do not have fully fledged supply chain management functions. So in some municipalities, it's more a back office function, and then in some municipalities it's more strategic of nature. That's the one issue. The second issue is that this discipline also lends itself to a lot of turnover. particular within the procurement environment. And I don't need to say much about that. So we also get a situation where the turnover of staff in the supply chain management environment is higher than in some other disciplines. So what we've done over these years, taking into account that we're sitting with these kind of issues within municipalities, from a supply chain perspective, we've driven the district approach for the last 5 years, where we also have created reference groups. So we've made use of the more experienced staff within municipalities in order to also to capacitate other individuals in the smaller municipalities. So we've got a couple of reference groups that we use whenever there are new developments in supply chain management, whether it's on the technology side or under the policy side. So we're making use of other municipalities apart from the Treasury's responsibility to be part of this capacity building program. And of course, we also use it via our supply chain management forum. So we've got supply chain management forum and about 4 reference groups that we're using. A particular example where we use it is, and Jolinda spoke about the change in the policy, particularly on the preferential procurement policy, where we've established a group within the province consisting of various municipalities, and then of course also the provincial treasury. And through that approach, we've put a standard policy together which municipalities had to internalize. That also meant that they didn't need to go and appoint consultants to write those policies for themselves. Then what we also do have as part of our capacity program, we've got the panel of expertise, and depending on where the need is, we can then, through our panel of experts, allocate then a capacity to certain municipalities. We've got our annual supply chain indaba, which we basically use not only to educate, but also planning for supply chain for the next financial year. And then, of course, we also had the annual smart procurement conference. We didn't have it over the last 2 years because of the pandemic, but the intention is to again this year to have the conference, and we will try to take that to the rural areas instead of having it in Cape Town. So we've got a quite comprehensive approach, because one of our functions is to support, assist and guide municipalities. A lot of our effort basically goes into ensuring that municipalities not only understand the legislative environment, but is also capacitated to drive procurement strategies in the municipalities. And as I've indicated, we do this through a more district approach. Thank you.
I think we've covered the questions. Thank you, colleagues. Chairperson.
Thank you very much. I see that I'm having an issue with my video. Members, are there any further questions? Kindly raise your hand if you do have any further questions. All right, I see no further oh, I do. Member Nkondlo. Apologies, Member Nkondlo, you are on mute.
Sorry, Chair. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. On page 108, can the department just explains this, I think on public finance program, sub-program 4, the 48% increase on infrastructure, what that is. I might have missed it, I think, in the explanations that they've been given. I'm not sure whether in page 119, am I audible?
Yes, perfectly audible. Thank you.
Okay. In page 119, Chair, there are just some concerning sort of figures there, if I may be indulged, on the economic classification, if such could be explained, the computer services, the contractors, and the property payments, which I think also on the property payments, one has seen also in the other classifications. Maybe there's an explanation there of the percentage changes that are very huge. So if I can just get an understanding of what these spiked increase are for. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Members, any further follow-ups? We'll make this the last round, I think, given that many have exhausted their questions already. All right. Just connected to Member Nkontlo's question, I would like to just ask how this may relate to the current database system that the province or that the department are currently trying to implement. I'll now hand over to the committee. I'll now hand over to the Minister and to the HOD.
Thank you very much, Chair. So we have a question on page 108 on the increase in infrastructure, and then a number of questions on page 119 regarding property payments and computers and how this links then to the database system. HOT, will you be able to take those questions?
Thank you, Minister. Yes, I can. The increase on page 108 on the infrastructure line item is to do with the mobilization of a panel of specialist infrastructure experts for the department. We have a number of relatively complex infrastructure financing or alternative infrastructure financing challenges, and this is to provide support in that environment. On page 119, let me hand over to the CFO in that respect. Anna Marie.
Thank you very much. I will respond to those questions. I think the first question was with regards to the computer services. As indicated in the previous responses to the questions, as well as the introduction by the Minister and the HOD, the Treasury has received additional funding for the digitalization, and that is what they spoke about, the data center, the ELS, as well as the CRM, and we have allocated that amount to the computer services, so that you will see that's why there's such a big increase on that. And specifically on property payments, I've also indicated in my response is on the modernization of the building and the space, and that is why there's that huge increase with regards to the property payments. So I think those were the two that the member asked for. Thanks. Maybe just on the question by the chair, maybe are you linking the response, my responses to the big changes on page 119 to your question on the database systems, or did I explain it sufficiently?
Yes, CFO, it was related to the latter, to the former.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. So noting that we have completed our rounds of questions and that this is actually a public engagement still, I would just like to double check and see if there are any members of the public who are on the call and who would like to pose a question. You can do so using the raise hand function. All right. I see no hands, and so from there, our submissions and responses have concluded. So the committee will now move on to resolutions and recommendations. I would like to very much thank the department and the Minister for all the work that you've done in terms of this budget. We can see that it's definitely going to result in service delivery, and we really appreciate how seriously you take finance, because the implications of your department not doing so would be incredibly severe for our public, for our residents, and it's just unfathomable to consider that. So Again, thank you very much. And also to CFO, I do hope you get to enjoy your day and celebrate with family and loved ones. I will now excuse you so that the committee can deliberate further.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, to you and the members.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Chairperson.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
All right. Hello, everybody. So before we go into the nitty-gritty of the vote and voting accordingly, I would like to ask if there are any resolutions emanating from today's discussions. You could please raise your hand to indicate such. I recognize Member van der Westhuizen.
Can I go, Chair?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. The first thing that I would like us to acknowledge in terms of our resolutions is really the a feeling that I got that these officials are really focused, dedicated, and that they see themselves as those enabling others in the both in province and in local government to be able to pursue or to maintain good good practices. So I first would like us, and that's my resolution, that I propose that we acknowledge the quality of the work of the Provincial Treasury, but particularly also thank them for their service in assisting other departments to move towards good governance and good financial practices. The second one is still, Chair, I asked the question, the Honourable Seleko asked the question, but I still don't get how behind the rationale of what a municipality must do to eventually be assisted also financially by the Provincial Treasury. And if I could propose a resolution that we ask of them to inform us in writing of, you know, how a decision they come to a decision to allocate what amount to which municipality, what are the variables, and must it be at the request of the municipality? You know, how do they determine the extent of the support that they would be rendering to a municipality? Those would be my two resolutions.
Okay, thank you very much. And yes, to your first resolution, I completely agree and support it. Just on the basis of whenever I've engaged with officials from the Department of Treasury, you can see how incredibly passionate they are about their work. And I think one of the driving forces behind that is because they understand that getting their job right ensures that we do not have corruption in government. And you can really see that that is such a motivating force behind the work that they do. So it's incredibly commendable, and I'm very happy that you've acknowledged that as well. Member Nkwantlo, I saw your hand.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, on the matter of staff morale, staff encouragement, the first thing I would like to make a recommendation on is that perhaps we need to ask the department, it could be a joint with the Premier's one, because I'm not sure whether it has happened in this committee. I think this strategy that the provincial government is driving around managing COE, you know, and how such, I think one of the senior officials was saying they've done with the first phase in terms of headcount, they are now getting into the productivity aspect. I'm very much interested of what that means, because at face value, indeed, in the commitment of staff, it's very important to recognize that. But what goes in that in terms of the environment and also how such gets to be recognized for me is something that I think as part of the employer to be able to balance. So I'm interested to understand how that is done. And in that regard, I would request a much more clearer explanation for me, especially from the financing. I heard what they said. Maybe if, I'm not sure whether that would have to go to the Department of Health or they could answer themselves, because I still am not convinced about the answer that they provided me around the issue of the interface servicing departments, head count and what they had to deal with versus what the population increase. So perhaps they could be able to provide me that answer. Maybe later with one of the coordinators, we can refine that particular question for them. The second one, Chair, is that I want to ask again whether in the committee or that could be shared, there in this page 87, what the department said is that they have developed this provincial and local government fiscal framework and strategy. I know they would make reference in their presentation about their fiscal strategy. I'm interested in this that came out of their research, because they didn't go there to at least give me what were the results of that strategy in real terms and what aspect of that is going to be implemented. So I'm interested if they could share that. They could share with me if others may not necessarily be having that much interest, because I'm really willing to learn more about how they nuance that fiscal environment between local government and the province. So if one can ask maybe for that as part of the resolutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just related to your resolution, and perhaps this is a part of pulling apart your first resolution, I think it would be helpful to get a report from not only Premier and Treasury, but Premier, Treasury and local government in terms of the challenges identified in attracting skilled staff to work in struggling municipalities, and the solutions that they would put forward in order to fill those vacancies. Do you think that would help as well with the first part of your question, Member Nkontlo?
That would be fine. That would be fine, Chair. To include local government is not an issue for me. I think particularly I'm more interested in our big departments like your education, social development, Department of Health, those three, because this is where the pressure points you find, of service delivery when it comes to the numbers that they have to deal with. And what innovation are we putting in place? This thing of getting contractors and then you say because of funding issues, you must then withdraw them. And then there are service delivery protests or complaints on the other hand, and people are saying are inundated, because that's the problem that you are finding now on these wage negotiations of public servants, because they are arguing that there is more workload their side, and government every time talks about austerity, trying to cost containment, and that particular burden is being transferred to them, whom personally, they must sacrifice their family times and all of that. And indeed, they come and become the best public servants, which we celebrate, but we do not know the cost of this in as far as the mental wellness and other of these public servants.
Thank you. I would add social development to that as well, as there's a significant staff contingent and the use of contractors as well. And then linking that, like you said, to the studies on the growth of the population and the demands resulting.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I recognize Member Seleko.
Thank you, Chair. Mine is only one. I don't know whether I was listening when they were talking about this particular matter, but there was a lot of mention in terms of the combined assurance framework. in terms of, and I would just want to know more details in terms of this particular, framework, what it entails and where has it been tested, if that's just for my resolution, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, bonk.
All right. Okay, members, we will thank you for your inputs on the resolutions. I think those are really fantastic resolutions. So we'll now move on to discussing or considering the adoption and draft committee report on vote 3. So members, if you could please express whether or not you support or do not support the vote. If I could get a show of hands to indicate. Member Seleko?
Chair, I support the vote.
Thank you. Member Nkondlo?
Chair, as the African National Congress, in line with Rule 90, we do not support the vote.
Okay, thank you. So that I believe may be registered as a minority vote, but perhaps I can just check in, members. Are there any other views in terms of this vote? Any seconding of what has been proposed so far? Perhaps I can pick on Member van der Westhuizen.
I'm happy to support. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, members. So now on to us having considered this. Apologies, I've just lost track of my notes. So we will note the African National Congress's vote as a minority vote. Members, can we please discuss whether or not we will move to adopt the report?
I propose that we adopt the report.
Thank you.
I second the proposal from Member Enriquez that we support the report, Chair.
Thank you very much.
I support the report.
Thank you, Chair. May I just ask, I think that a sentence in bold print, if there is a minority view, can be removed so that it says, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That can be deleted.
All right. Lizette, if you could just give me an indication when I can read in the vote.
Chairperson, you may read the report.
Thank you. If you could just scroll up slightly. I have very bad eyes. Would it be possible for you to just make it a bit bigger? Thank you. That's perfect. Thank you. All right. Committee report. Report to the Standing Committee on Finance, Economic Opportunities and Tourism on Vote 3, Provincial Treasury, and schedule to the Western Cape Appropriation Bill B2 of 2003, dated 17 March 2023. The Standing Committee on Finance, Economic Opportunities and Tourism reports that it has concluded its deliberation on Vote 3, Provincial Treasury, in the schedule to the Western Cape Appropriation Bill B2 of 2023, referred to the committee in terms of Standing Rule 188, and that it supports the vote referred to it. In accordance with Standing Rule 90, the African National Congress has expressed its minority view not to support the vote. Members, thank you very much. Just in terms of moving forward, I am concluding this portion of the meeting. Our next agenda item is then the closure. I would just like to, before closing, really say thank you to each and every single one of you for bringing your A game today. We had really interesting discussions, really insightful questions, and I think that was also assisted by the department coming forward and providing very useful content for us to work with. But once again, thank you so much for the work that you do as a committee. I'm incredibly grateful to and appreciative to work with each and every single one of you. And also a special thank you to all of the staff who make all of this possible behind the scenes. We don't acknowledge you nearly enough, but we know that we wouldn't be able to do any of this without you. So thank you, all of you. With that, I adjourn the meeting. Oh, I see Member van der Westhuizen's hand.
just some clarity on when we see each other again, Chair.
Thank you very much for the question. I believe our next meeting is scheduled at 1 o'clock for Finance, Economic Opportunities and Tourism. Yes, 1 o'clock.
See you then. Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Lala.
Thank you, Fana.
Goodbye.
Bye, Lizette.